So, welcome to the combined meeting of the Columbia Linux User Group and Upstate Carolina Linux User Group, uh, all South Carolina user groups. And today we have Coach Victor Hicks from Coding with Culture, and he's going to give us an overview of his program. Coach Hicks, take it away.
All right. Well, as mentioned, my name is Victor Hicks. I am a computer science teacher, founder of Coding with Culture, which, to give you guys a little bit of background, was founded about 3 years ago now. Right, and well, I guess two and a half, right in the midst of the pandemic, when I realized that one of the great or the good sides of the virtual learning experience is so many of my students who struggle connecting with computer science and STEM education really were, this was one of the areas where they tended to be able to connect over the virtual learning and kind of overcome some of those challenges. Always been passionate about culturally responsive and sustainable education with my students, and having attended an HBCU and realizing how much that was a part of my success, or if that's what you want to call it at this point of adulthood. Definitely shaped me a lot as an educator, and saw the positive influence that it had on many of my students after I attended. So as I looked and kind of went through the process of, looking at best practices in elementary computer science, realizing that a lot of the tutorial based practice, so to speak, was just that. It was kind of the tip of the iceberg. And so I said, well, in creating these project-based learning opportunities where students are able to kind of show and demonstrate some of these computational thinking skills, let's go ahead and try to combine HBCUs, because there's a lot of great culture involved, of course, in many of these institutions, but it also provides a very realistic path to help students that traditionally are not represented well in computer science or in computational thinking related careers. Because as we know, HBCUs often offer, those majors for students, but also offer the supportive environments that sometimes students need to be successful in those fields. So what I wanted to do today, I know you guys, we have many PD opportunities. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what Coding with Culture is all about. Give you some examples of some actual projects that we've done with students, how we've tied in some computational thinking, practice, as well as with plugged and unplugged lessons that also incorporated computer science thinking, or computational thought. So the lesson we talked about today, and again, do want to go ahead and frame and say that Coding with Culture has a school-based piece. So a lot of the curriculum was actually taught in my K-8 computer science classroom. But I also do manage and run Coding with Culture as a summer camp and after school program, which has been virtual for the most part. This year, we've partnered with the Makerspace here in Decatur, Georgia. We've also started to run through some of our offer some of our programs in person. All right, let me go ahead and make sure I'm clicking through okay, here we go. All right, so a little bit about me. I am Coach Hicks, as said. Talked about who I was, and I do want to go ahead and make sure that I'd say, in all fairness, that HBCUs are definitely my passion. So as we look to increase or incorporate more culturally relevant and sustainable curriculum or opportunities for our students, as I think that really is kind of if there is a quick fix or one, kind of phrase answer to how we address some of the digital divide, I do think those culturally responsive and sustainable experiences are important. Definitely, as I started to teach, I'm not a computer science teacher by trade. My background is actually in arts education. But as I was offered the opportunity to begin teaching computer science and STEM, and moving into the 21st century, realizing that providing equitable experiences for all children, but especially children of color who tend to be underrepresented in these fields, was important. So again, making sure that we're not just giving them the very basic kind of hour of code experience, because as we all know, as computer science folks, that is not what really transfers into the workplace. So what I was seeing is that students were coming into computer science, as long as it was gamified and we were doing Minecraft and Angry Birds, I had them hooked. which again, I don't think is a very hard task. But as they were moving on into middle school and actually having to kind of apply some of those coding skills in actual academic work, we were seeing the numbers drop off. So I feel like we were kind of putting a band-aid over the problem. And so I really wanted to make sure that I was addressing that responsibly in my classroom. Definitely wanted to include, as I think project-based learning is key in helping kids getting 21st century skills developed. So I was looking for ways to take what they were learning in computer science using some of the more basic tutorial-based programs, and then putting them into more of a sandbox type of environment where they were then able to creatively or create digital artifacts that showed their understanding of of computer science. All right, so we'll kind of break out of our agenda a little bit. I won't actually go through the model lesson and have you guys pretend to be kids. I know that that is not teachers' favorite things, but I do just want to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that we would normally talk about. So we also do a teacher-based training as well. That's the other arm of Coding with Culture, is actually trying to get our message out. To help give resources to teachers who need, who may be looking for ways to incorporate some more project-based learning into their computer science class. All right. So again, I always tell teachers, again, HBCUs is my bag. So again, I'm able to kind of teach this, and a lot of the information that I give just kind of comes from the heart. So again, I definitely think the most beneficial lessons are created that are created rooted in something important to you. If your students are old enough and able to kind of articulate some of their interests, I've also realized that sometimes asking them what they're interested in is also important. Okay. Kind of in the breakdown of creating my lessons, when people say, well, how do you come up with our topics? What do you decide? Because again, we've done projects around African American superheroes tying into African mythology. We've done a thing about voice and social justice. If you guys are familiar with the Ear Sketch platform. So again, it's not all necessarily HBCU. But again, one of the common themes is that these are things either that we are passionate about as a community, and definitely tapping into the interest level of my students. I think the big question is, as a teacher or as an educator, how I kind of gauge my lessons and whether or not they are purposeful is really asking myself, how can our students employ either design thinking or computational thinking to address this topic? So again, sometimes something may be very relevant to the community, but it really necessarily does not uh, allow or I guess kind of allow for students to use coding. So again, you don't necessarily want to. I realize kids and students through my 20 years of teaching are very good. Um, how can I say it? Filters of when things are, just kind of okay. This seems like the responsible thing to say, so let's go ahead and put this in our lesson. But it really does not connect to concrete learning tasks or making sure they're practicing these skills that will allow them to actually continue on, past K through 12 in computer science. All right, so how I kind of create my lessons, definitely begin with the passion. So for me, and again, this will look a lot different for different educators. HBCU culture and history has always been something I've incorporated as a reading teacher, PE, computer science, technology, just because I've been fortunate enough to teach a population. Again, not as necessarily all African American students, but a population that definitely would benefit of learning about this diverse opportunity. So I think as an educator, one of the things that's most important, people say, well, coach, if you're not working with a predominantly African American class, how do you, you know, kind of make HBCUs relevant? And my answer to that question is always that they are part of the cultural fabric, many of America, of our country. So I think when we talk about diversity and equity and inclusion, it's important that all cultures are learning about all cultures. And in my experience as an educator, I found that many students, actually, interestingly enough, in that have gone on to STEM fields and attended HBCUs, you know, benefited more from some of the environmental pieces. So the smaller class sizes, the professors that are more hands-on. It is definitely a family environment by design. And I think that we all probably have learners somewhere, African American and not, who would benefit from that type of environment. So dance education, if you guys are familiar with stepping, the art form made famous, by historically Black fraternities and sororities. and also the band. So these were just kind of as I brainstormed some of my lessons, I wanted to take you guys through kind of what my thought process is. Um, the second piece, and I would argue as a computer science teacher, because again, I want to, one of the things I've always said in kind of gauging project-based learning lessons is making sure the kids aren't too caught up in just the theme. So yes, we want them to have this cultural um, piece. We want them to have this exposure, but we definitely want to make sure that they're getting these skills. So for this particular lesson, algorithmic thinking, sequencing, definitely communicating with and about computing and data, and really that comes in simply by allowing students time to pair program or to at least to journal, and really just being diligent of having a hard stop in our lessons and making sure that they have time to communicate to myself and to others about what they're actually doing. Okay. Also looking a heavy piece of decomposition, and you notice none of this really necessarily says coding. So I'm as a teacher, for me, coding is a skill, but I also want to make in a very necessary skill, excuse me. But I also want to make sure that students realize that is just one small piece of the computer science puzzle. So there's many other areas, many other skills that we want children to walk away from these computer science experiences that may actually be more of a soft skill. Okay, so being able to take a problem and break it down into smaller chunks um, will definitely be beneficial if they decide to code as a living, or they kind of take run away with that. Or but again, as they work in these 21st century college and career environments, some of those soft skills that are related to computational thinking are important too. All right. So these are just a couple of the things. If you guys are familiar with the Kapoor Center, this is a little bit of the justification why we do what we do. They Kapoor Center has been at the forefront of writing on studies and different computer science training opportunities that really focus on providing equity in computer science instruction. So I won't read these out loud, but these are just some of the kind of bullet points that they ask teachers that are looking to really make an impact and address some of the DEI issues that we have in computer science and computer science education. But I wanted to share these because, of course, these kind of are the why historically Black colleges included in STEM and computer science education are important. All right, so I think we hear these statements sometimes, and it's become a little cliche, admittedly, that in order for students to be it, they have to see it, and I think I agree with that statement 100%. But I think that seeing has to be meaningful. So part of the justification of the HBCU piece is that it's a great, exciting cultural piece for students to really get elbows deep and create amazing digital artifacts. But also, they are hubs of young people that are going into STEM. They are young people that clearly have gone into post-secondary education. When we look at their alumni, we are looking at very realistic examples for students, and also giving them not only the end goal, but also when I walk out of my high school, here's a place that is designed to help me. And like I said, specifically speaking on our African American students, I know asking them sometimes to kind of or to delve into uncharted territory in computer science. Sometimes it's also helpful to give them an environment, and to be able to say with confidence that this is someplace that will help you get there. It definitely connects to student knowledge, their interest and experience, even if, because again, there's also a very rich and celebratory cultural piece. So as students create videos, or if they're creating a website, or if you want them to learn how to code, I'm thinking off top, even, some basic digital animation in Scratch, HBCUs also offer exciting content for students to kind of dig into and create those projects. We definitely look at, and like I said, I teach younger students. So a lot of times I will and can ask, but sometimes I have to kind of give my example first. So here's something Coach Hicks is passionate about. Here's how we create these projects around it, kind of give them the idea of what those ideas look like, and then provide feedback. But again, as you guys teach across the grade levels, again, HBCUs will not attract or appeal to every student population. So again, I encourage you to definitely poll your students, find out what's important to them in their community, as you look for meaningful, and relevant content.
Hey, Coach Hicks,
Yes.
I was curious. Are you based out of a particular college or school system, or
So I was with the Archdiocese. I'm actually looking to transition and do coding with culture full time. So we are this year. I was with the Archdiocese of Atlanta. We do offer our program across the city. So our idea is hopefully kind of going in and providing computer science experiences. What I was finding as an electives teacher is that it was a little bit more stifled, so we weren't allowed to really provide the time, and after school was one thing. So we're to answer your question, most recently with a private school system, but looking to transition out to more school-based partnerships.
cool? Good luck with that.
Thank you. Listen, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. So the lesson goal, you guys can kind of read over this. So this is one of our unplugged lessons. Now, if you guys are familiar with code.org, they do a really, really great job with I was finding that a lot of my students, especially in the K-5 realm, were finding a lot of, you know, they enjoyed the gamification piece. So they love the Angry Birds, they love um, the Minecraft, the different kind of game-based platforms. But I really wasn't seeing any transferable skills. So I loved some of the unplugged lessons. But just to be, completely transparent, they were a little dry for my kids. So keeping them engaged to those lessons where I knew I needed them to learn, algorithms as an idea before we translated it into the drag and drop environment in code.org. So we took one of the ideas, and again, kind of looking at what are the big takeaways. So of course, with algorithms, we want kids to think about creating solutions that are kind of one step at a time. So again, taking my passion about HBCUs, the kids love the band. So again, here in Atlanta, we're fortunate to have four historically Black colleges that are in the area. So we did we brought the band director in virtually, and had them speak about how they kind of create, from looking at these videos, and how do we get the bands to create these, elaborate formations and, parts of their performance. And then we tied those into algorithms. So these were ways that students could think about, and again, taking a computational concept, or computational thinking concept, but then applying it into real life applications. So these were, as you see, the goals, our objectives for that lesson. And again, of course, we translate that into a little bit more student friendly kind of language that the students are able to to understand what they're, or have a good understanding about what they're supposed to get from the lesson. All right. And so this here, and I won't, so make sure we have enough time for questions at the end. So this will kind of be the example of the intro. Okay. So the times we did not have the band director that was able to come in, we just showed the students, and I did this lesson. This example here was with second and third grade. So we talked about how do we notice, what do we notice about the shapes the band creates. We talk a little bit about how almost reverse engineering. So that's where another way we introduce another STEM/CS concept. We say, well, how do you think this happens? There's 200-300 kids on the field. How does one person create this end result? They have to give directions, and okay, well, can they tell everybody to move at the same time? Well, no, we have to tell this group, and we notice that everybody's kind of doing their own thing. So it really just, in a lot of it in that intro part, it was very important to, again, going back to the idea of getting kids creating about communicating, because again, as a K-5 instructor, where I was seeing is that the kids could drag and drop and have the Angry Bird going around to but they couldn't tell me why they were doing, or really what they were doing. It almost kind of, they related it to creating this, or playing a video game, excuse me, not even necessarily creating one. So we were missing a lot of the I guess the checking for understanding. So again, giving kids the opportunity to verbally express their use of some of those computational thinking skills. All right. And I will pause there for a second because I can't see. Do we have any questions so far about anything? You got to know that was a lot right in the beginning. So I do want to pause before I keep going to see if anybody had any other questions? Okay. All right.
And I'll be watching the chat too and chime in if I see anything.
Okay. Thank you. So
Hey,
again,
hey,
going back.
Coach.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, this has been so you're all about HBCUs, but you're teaching K through 5,
K through 8. K
K through
K
8.
through 8. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. And coding with culture is specifically targeted to those kids.
Yeah, so we have a couple, so more of our curriculum K through 8, like so more 80, most of our classes that are how can I explain it? So like I guess more of our camp. So the things where we, plan the scope and sequence from beginning to end are us. And then 9 through 12 can still, be a part, but we also offer one-on-one tutorials. So our high school kids have tended to be like smaller groups, kids that wanted to come in and learn Python, or wanted to specifically create an app. I have a kid that's actually doing a portfolio. They're in a STEM school now, and one of the things they have to do is create a project. So I'm helping with him with his coding of his app. So yeah, we do. Our primary customer base is K through 8, or student base, I should say, is K through 8, and then 9 through 12 gets more of the individual tutorials, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. So then it's like I said, the kids go through the lessons. There's definitely, we do a lot of the unplugged lessons. So again, those are the days they're really not necessarily on the computer. So a lot of it is just really discussing how we take algorithms and, create them, or how we use them in those real life situations. Then the kids transition to the computer, and then we kind of, get the reinforcement through the practice of the more guided events, or tutorials, so to speak. All right. Oops, sorry, went the wrong way. Again, we talk a little bit about showing kids examples of people that not only are traditionally underrepresented in STEAM, and I'll just say STEAM because that tends to be the adding the arts. It seems to be more of the trend with some of the younger grades, definitely the elementary school students, but also letting them realize that science and computational thinking aren't just used by people that sit behind the computer. So for here, we talked about 2 of the first female African-American band directors, and how they use algorithms and computational thinking in their day-to-day work. So again, providing those, not just kind of like, hey, here's a random, computer scientist who really has nothing to do what we're going to talk about in a second, but that they say we're supposed to expose you guys to this. So again, I'm really, really a stickler on, yes, the culturally relevant experiences, but also making sure that they are purposeful to what we actually want the students to take away from that lesson. All right, and I'll share with you guys too just an example of what the student side of this looks. So once we kind of go to this part of the mini lesson, I guess I fibbed a little bit in the fact that it's unplugged, where they're not doing coding in the traditional, environment. Of course, we were virtual, so even unplugged had to be kind of plugged. But I'll show you guys in a minute what the student manipulative looked like, and how we got how they actually practiced some of those steps. All right. So I will switch over. I think I have to stop sharing here first. Give me 1 second. Okay. I'll share again, just so you can see this. So this is what our virtual kids used. So they were actually kind of given the challenge and put into the, it was a whole big spiel. I actually couldn't find it. It must be on my work account, where we did a video of them being charged and hired as these band directors. So again, big part of the of using project-based learning. So this was a unit that kind of took us through a couple of different weeks, all of under the aspects of these students stepping, using their imaginations to kind of step into the band director's shoes, and then using how, reflecting and actually practicing using computational thinking in creating these performances, so to speak. So we definitely we talk a lot about the algorithms. I think for younger students, getting them to understand that, translating what you want to happen in algorithms, so humans speak, into these coding sections. So even though they're not using the traditional blocks that they would see in their tutorials, we do want them to get used to translating, a goal in, English, or in like I say human language, into some type of symbol. So they get the idea that algorithms and programs are related, but that the difference is in the language that which they use. So this talks a little bit about, give students, and now with older students, a way to differentiate this is challenge the kids to actually come up with their own symbols. So what are some of the directions or commands that we may have to use, and then how do we create symbols to make those directions clear? So just a little bit of a way to differentiate that. I've used this as old as, because surprisingly enough, I had a lot of the computer science actually skills. So the algorithms, the conditionals, the events, the repeat commands. My middle school students knew them and knew how to, how can I say, the syntax piece, but really did not understand the why. So why do we use, what when we break it down, what is the function of a loop, or what is the function of a variable? So sometimes kind of breaking it down to some of the basics and unplugging, again, them communicating about some of those, or collaborating around computing, helps solidify kind of the why we do some of the things we do in programming. So again, kids manipulate through here. They have the opportunity to write the algorithm. So they drag, you'll see there's different formations the first time they're challenged. And then they had to actually go out and drag the code out. So here's an example of the given formation. Okay. And then they actually go through and they're able to manipulate the steps. So again, how do we start our program? Again, that's the way to kind of tie in. Again, you can introduce as many different concepts as you want here. So when the whistle blows would be the example, would be a great way to tie in or introduce events. So how do our programs know when to run? And then just like I said, these symbols were kind of basic. So each symbol moved the band, each section of the band, which were kind of located by their different colors. So the kids had to challenge, number one, who are we coding? So again, really making them focus on algorithms being one step at a time, and making sure that, we're giving one clear, simple direction that a computer or a machine can understand. And again, this just kind of goes through here. There's a couple other ones. And again, for my early finishers, or the kids that had a kind of a better understanding, they did the opposite. So they partnered up with the group. The partner would write out a code for the band. Okay. Of course, we had to give a very explicit and direct lesson on how we manipulate Google Slides, because as much as I thought the kids knew, you'd be surprised in the moment some of the things they don't. So we talked about how to, for the younger kids, this was another way to tie in some digital literacy, because we use the function bars, or the toolbar, to really kind of help manipulate, to change and edit some of the things they needed to do in their unplugged activity. Okay. So that is just a little bit of that. So this would be something that we would do unplugged. And so I'll pause there. That would kind of be our algorithm, or HBCU, band algorithm lesson in a nutshell. So do we have any other? I don't think we had anything in the chat, so, but I'll pause a second. All right. So for our other class, so our after school class, again, that would be more traditional, how we introduce HBCUs, cultural relevance, into the classroom. One of our projects that our current students, our after school students, are working on, because again, they see me more of in the realm of, they're coming more like an after school club. Some kids come twice a week for an hour. Other kids come more camp based, like in the summer, we'll do like a week-long session where the scholars report for an hour or so, usually for about 1 week. All right, so to give you guys a little example of that, their projects tend to be a little bit more STEM. We do definitely have a commitment to some type of computational thinking in our projects, but these tend to kind of cross platforms as far as what kids are working on. So The group I'm working with now, let me switch over to here real quick. All right. So our students that are working in, because we know everyone loves Minecraft. So as they're doing their coding, HBCU. Okay. So what that looks like is they create a several digital artifacts that they end up creating in a um, they end up presenting in a digital or virtual college fair. Okay, so they're given this again real world example. We definitely go through the design thinking process. We talk about what those steps mean, and then as they get into the prototype, the testing phase, that's really where we kind of drive home some of the computational thinking skills we want them to get. All right. So they are usually tasked. This was for a group. The group I have this week is actually a little bit younger. So I kind of give them, they create a model campus, a model HBCU campus using Minecraft for education. We tie in mathematics, of course, because we talk about conversion area. How do we, represent an HBCU using scale? Uh, a lot of what they do as far as the coding aspects, because again, we want to make sure that we are staying true to our computer science roots. They do a lot of their creation, their HBCU commercial. They create a virtual campus tour in Scratch. So again, the way that looks, we do a little bit of the kind of take a chunk of the uh, concepts. So, for example, the kids that are creating their campus tours just finished an actual lesson on events. So now that we go into Scratch, we go into more of this, free coding environment. How do we use those events to make our backdrops change to give the impression of a campus tour? How do we time the so it's a couple different ways, again, kind of teach the concept and then allow them to apply it, but again through this culturally relevant lens. They're using ear sketch. This group, like I said, they're kind of split about fourth to sixth grade, so they're working in design teams. And so my sixth graders, to make sure that we're differentiating and adding that rigor in for them, they're actually working on Python. So again, still working on this big prototype, this campus, but they're actually coding a school song using Python or Java, actually depending on their interest, to code a school song using EarSketch. So if you guys have not used EarSketch before, I will say it is a shameless plug. It is a free platform. Some computer science students at Georgia Tech wrote the program. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Pharrell, the producer Alicia Keys got behind us. They do a contest every year where students actually can win money for coding their own song. So it's called Your Voice is Power. I think it's earsketch.georgiatech.edu, but it's totally free. And there's actually lessons that line up with the AP computer science standards. There's some that, so again, it's pretty much course based, but there's a whole musical element involved with that as well. So highly recommend if you guys are not familiar. They also do, and that's not listed here, they work on, when I've done this with younger kids, some of the Azabots. So again, I like to make sure that they're seeing physical computing, the on-screen coding, a little bit of game design, more sandbox type material. So again, there's still, although there's a hands-on piece, project-based learning, there's still small pieces of computer science that help build this whole end result. All right. So again, we talk a lot about the engineering design process. So again, yes, cultural relevance, yes, cultural sustainability. But again, I want kids to walk away with these skills and this knowledge that will help them translate, whether they're, in a classroom environment or actually putting these to practice in real life. All right, so these are just an example. We don't have to necessarily read through these. These are just some of the things, how we break down teaching kids, because believe it or not, what I found is that even with predominantly African-American students, many did not know about HBCUs. So this is where we kind of teach some of their relevance and their importance. Again, I would argue that it's important for all students to learn, because again, these are very, very important pieces of our American culture, and definitely beneficial to students that are not a part even of the African American community. So they go through their name. This one, again, we talk about computer science. It does delve into design thinking. As they choose their logo, there's a graphic design piece. So some of you guys may be like me, that even as a computer science teacher, technology is often a much broader, number one, expectation of many of our schools, but also I think I would argue that those are some pretty important skills for kids to have too. So they get an opportunity to use Google Slides, as they're going through even some more of the scientific type assign or projects. All right, and then sorry, I think I deleted that one. Nope. So they go through again, just kind of the different steps. They're going through the design thinking process. Definitely a PBL feel to it. They choose a mascot. Now, again, that would be another way that they create their, they can use coding. So once they created their mascot, their job was to design a Scratch project that kind of introduced their mascot. Could they include their school colors? Now, the building of their campus takes place a couple places. So again, my kids that where there's a little bit more student choice. We talk about some of the elements that make up college campuses. How do we represent that in coding? So my kids that really were, my Scratch heads who loved it and wanted to be on Scratch 24/7, they could represent their campus that way. So how do we use loops? How do we use, sprites and events to make this digital tour or presentation, communicate the message we're trying to communicate? Others did focus in Minecraft and went that way, but still, even with the agent, there were still ways for them they had to show some evidence of using computational thought. So they wanted to be more explicit code. I'm in Scratch creating boom, boom, boom. I want to code, I want to challenge myself and do the text-based coding. So I'm going to do the school song piece, or, I'm only doing this because Coach Hicks said it was Minecraft. So I have to kind of get the coding in, or the computer science in through some alternative methods. So again, really just making sure that as the professional that I have the skills, that because again, we're not really closing or addressing any digital divide if I'm standing there talking, into an empty room. Every kid that's really not there already is still disengaging, even in the class, or even if we offer the class or they decide to register, if we're not getting those skills in, and also kind of, really, really igniting that interest to the point where it's sustainable. So definitely introducing, getting the kids to practice computational thinking, but offering many different entry points to make sure that students are connecting. All right, and I think pretty much everything else we talked about. This is just an example. So again, this is something that we would kind of use to gauge the lesson. Usually, anything I expect of students, this would be something I would share with them in the beginning, because especially when we talk about project-based learning, and I would argue probably even more when it's related to computer science. Students I like to front load the information, because I think for kids to really get through um, project design, they need to have a little bit more autonomy in how they move through that, and then how do we delegate who's going to do what, whose strengths. So that's, again, going back to those soft skills we talked about in the beginning, and why I think, computer science is important across, and all students, to me, should have that exposure. All right, and then the final project, they create a commercial. So again, really making sure they're cultural relevance, but also that we're communicating about and around computing and and computer science. Because what I was realizing is that students could code all day. I had some kids that were creating, next level projects in Scratch, really, really complicated artifacts, but could not translate and theme is not the right word, but the skill set. So again, if I take it out of here and I kind of give you a different environment and different parameters, I wasn't seeing my kids be able to transfer those skills. So I'm a stickler on them really having as many opportunities, whether it's Flipgrid for those that prefer, that platform. If they want to write about it, draw about it, just communicate to me what you understood from this lesson. And again, going from there. So now with the high school kids, their introduction to the HBCU. So again, I tend to see them a little bit more one-on-one. So they're not with me in doing. Oh, sorry. They're not really with me a lot doing the online kind of guided curriculum. So a lot of times, again, they're coming in more so with a specific task in mind. I've had kids that are working on the preparing for the AP exam, or realize their senior year. A lot of states now, I know Chicago caught a lot of my kids in the middle of their high school careers, and now they had to have a computer science credit to pass. So theirs has been a little bit more where they kind of come in with a task or a goal at hand. But definitely, again, because the time is more of the essence, they get a little bit more of the, hey, have you looked at, Morehouse's computer science program? Or, have you looked at, I think the organization is Code House, with a gentleman that are recent alums of Morehouse College have started a great internship program with kids that I think their program is for kids that are coming out, or they mentor them from freshman year of college on through graduation. But again, just making sure that those students, it's not as, I guess the exposure is a little bit more direct. With the younger students, we get them excited through incorporating and infusing a lot of that into their projects. But with the older students, it's like, hey, if you're thinking about computer science, here's some of the places that you may want to go. Because like I said, MIT, Georgia Tech, definitely top ranked institutions, and rightfully so. But I think we also have to be respectful of the fact that many times those environments are, you know, and I mean, I don't necessarily think that students are not able to go and compete, but we also know the minds of 16 and 17-year-olds. So I think we have to look at, for me, what's the end result. If we do want to increase this diversity, which I think we all realize is important and necessary, we have to provide our kids, every kid, like, just like for me, Ivy League and computer science wasn't my thing, but I knew, that type of environment wasn't going to get me. And that if someone told me that was how to become a teacher, I probably would not be sitting here in front of you today because, that's not every student. So I just want to make sure that, in addressing this very specific problem, that we're giving them realistic um, solutions. And again, even if many of my students don't choose HBCUs, at least I know that they've made an informed choice because they've been very, very well informed of um, this type of institution, and other institutions as well. But again, so they can say and make the conscious decision, well, I know about this piece, but here's the reason this environment may be better for my goals. So we do tie it in with the bigger kids, but just not as because like I said, they're generally not just coming for a random purpose. They really want to kind of get like I said, it is actually more tutorials. A lot of them are enrolled in um, computer science classes, the CTAE classes at their schools, and just need help with concepts, or more so kind of they're taught and they kind of come to me with what they need help with. So, but as far as coding with culture is concerned, that's all I have as far as my overview. I didn't want to talk you guys ears off too long, but if you guys have any questions, or you know anything you guys can think of, anything that might not have been clear, you guys wanted some more explanation around, um, the floor is open.
I gotta say, Coach Hicks, I really like the creative way that you approach this. Maybe it's because I'm a band geek, but that you incorporate the arts into the way of teaching and algorithmic thinking. Because you're right, you have to think of it as an algorithm when you're marching.
Yep.
Same as doing recipes and that sort of thing. But yeah, I got to say, I really like your approach. That's really great.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I realized I said, that was one of the, when we sat through the many different STEAM type, trainings, and when it went from STEM, when it transitioned initially, and I feel like a lot of people, as with many educational trends, it was like, okay, arts, okay, have the kids draw, okay, if it can be a lesson on ancient Rome, okay, have the kids draw a picture, that's the arts, and I'm like, I don't think we're really getting, and it actually kind of came from my background, because again, my initial background was in dance. So I'm like, as I'm learning kind of the how and the some of the concepts of what we want to teach kids in computer science, I'm like, well, hey, if choreography isn't an algorithm, then, and so then, like I said, starting to look into some of the different genres, realizing how
Exactly,
much, yep, how much the
exactly,
arts is
and
algorithmic thinking.
it's also got its own language too.
Right.
You might say a programming language because I've seen like dance step, um, and I'm not a dancer, but I have seen some of that sort of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and you can equate that to be to a computer language.
Absolutely,
Um,
and we tend to. So, like I said, that was even with that we did a unit with oh goodness, Alvin Ailey, the Revelation. So they had a great social studies curriculum where the kids kind of learned about the timepiece that he choreographed, but then we actually added our own kind of computer science piece to it. So that way, and we talked about the language of dance and how, and the kids were able to look at some of the choreography written out, and like you said, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It is absolutely, you know, down to even, like I said, translating what you want the movement to look like. And then how do we, translate this into the code? Because technically a dancer should be able to look at those symbols and follow, the choreography step by step. So yeah, you're right.
I had a question also. I was just curious, like what you're talking about with trying to connect with students makes a lot of sense to me. But I was curious if you had any, I guess, data on I guess, the increase in engagement versus a more traditional program that doesn't try to make that cultural connections. And like, I guess, are you seeing more people, get into the computer science or at least be interested in it? I'm just curious of the results, I guess.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So I would say, so for our K-8 environment, the first charter school, we kind of rolled out the environment. The kids choose their electives. I mean, we saw, I would say, a growth of about, I would say about 60. That's about a good 60%. So I went from having, just kind of give you a, in layman's terms, one section of, middle school intro to computer science to having four. So I think once students, and the person that taught before me taught more traditional, let's do code HS and just kind of go through these modules and, and I mean, we weren't seeing kids. And then from that particular group, once many went on to our neighboring high school, did not continue in computer science. So, I mean, I would say I would, within coding with culture, I know our particular numbers. So our kids, we've now had about, because I said here in Georgia, they can start choosing computer science as a class. And we've had now, I would say, I think somewhere, I don't have my notebook with me, but it's about 80% of our kids that have gone on are taking CTAE either in high school or middle school. So
That's great.
That's awesome. Yeah. So like I said, now it's interesting, like I said, in contrast, starting in the K-5 space, the kids love Angry Birds. And like I said, the kind of gamification of the first part, when coding with code.org actually pushed that curriculum, which again, it was a godsend in the beginning, but I just wasn't seeing once. It's like you pulled that Band-Aid off and they were jumping because, CTAE kind of starts right away with Java, Python, whatever they may, HTML, depending on the elective. So we are seeing a little bit more.
Okay, good.
Yeah, then just, sticking with it a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, well, it makes sense. I mean, you hear students all the time say, reject a course or a topic just because they don't feel like it connects to their life, and
yep.
So it makes sense. I was just curious, if you've seen the results of that.
Yeah, well, like I said, we're at a point now where we're starting to see, we've had enough kids. Now, the first group of, so we'll kind of see our range. So our first group of kids that kind of started with us super young, they'll be going to middle school in next fall. So one more year. So 2023, 24. So we're actually working on part of the, a little bit more of the data collection following that first group to see, like, now they've kind of gone through 4 or 5 years of, either the school-based coding with culture or as it kind of transitioned into an organization on its own, how those kids, did they stick with it?
Yeah. I guess one more question. What's the future for this program? Like what is it just continuing to do kind of the same things to see that progression as they work through the elementary, middle, and high school, or are there plans to expand it beyond sort of these trials in Georgia, or?
Well, I mean, with the virtual space, we are open to providing it to students across the country, which we have, which was one of the great parts about, like I said, that's I guess you say, side benefit of the pandemic, was it kind of forced us to, translate a lot of what we did in person to the virtual space. So we're definitely open to continuing that work. We do, I would say, as far as like the grade levels, we do want to start following, of course, keeping in touch and supporting our alumni as they move on to college. Or college age, whatever that may be. But also looking at partnering with, because I feel like there's a big initiative now. You do have a lot of companies that have really started to invest in HBCU. So another future move is kind of looking at connecting with them and seeing how can we continue to create and support, this pathway. So how do if I think Apple is doing the innovation center and the with the HBCUs here, Morehouse or Spelman, somebody's getting this state of the art center. So really looking at how do we get our scholars, to put it simply, into those environments. So we're handling the K through 8 P or K through 12 piece. How are we specifically pushing them into or pushing them towards these organizations who will continue to support in college? But I think we're always open to expand. Like I said, for me personally, I definitely want to kind of, and this is probably going to sound bad, I think the classroom for me has become kind of stifling, because you have a lot. Again, you're under the umbrella of well, you're a specialist teacher, so we also need you doing carpool, and we only want you teaching this 45 minutes this day, and then tomorrow they're going to have this. So I really want to start again providing that environment, but I think being able to spread the message a lot further and get our impact into many schools across the country. So again, I think that right now, since it's an employee of one, which is me, I have to make sure that I'm available to kind of do that. So yeah, definitely want to keep teaching it. But I think we're really at a season now where, we are ready to expand and to grow.
Cool.
So, Coach, I got a couple of fifth graders that just graduated and are going into middle school. So sixth grade, and I'm wondering how I could get them involved with this.
So we have a couple different ways they can do. If we do the one-on-one virtual classes, and those are available to you guys anytime. We have a couple set days and times, hours you guys can choose from. And those run more traditional, like a lot of the coding camps. Well, I shouldn't say that. We're a lot more sustainable and relevant, but in the more traditional, so they can do 10 sessions, either 5 days, 2 days a week for 5 weeks, or 1 day a week for 10. And then that kind of gives them, they can choose from our standard curriculum. So, I mean, there's certain things that we'll definitely touch on just to make sure that they have a solid foundation. Because like I said, I don't want the kids, playing games, just, and that kind of be at the end of our, our time together. So we look at some of the kind of, I guess, scaffolding and, kind of hitting some of those terms as they are developmentally, excuse me, not terms, but skills as they're developmentally appropriate. Then we have our more traditional camp base, like our Minecraft camp, where we have, this is going to be offered from June 13th to June 18th and from 2 to 3 p.m. So there are a lot of options. You can translate. So like if, I have a kid that wanted to do the Minecraft camp, but could not do the hours that I was doing it as a whole group. So he's still doing the one-on-one, but just the Minecraft camp. So we have a lot of different points of entry, but yeah, we'd love to have you guys.
Thank you.
And then our website is codingwithculture.com. So all of our classes, our registration, are listed there.
What's the cost?
For the 10-week session, it's $145. And for the camps, they tend to run between 60 and 80, depending on if it's an hour-long or 2-hour-long class. 5 days, and that's usually 5 days a week for a week.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Any other questions? And then two, we also, I don't know if I mentioned that briefly, we also do teacher trainings too. So for schools that are looking for ways to implement on their own, or or ways to incorporate computer science and more other core content area, project-based learning. So we also offer that as well.
Any other questions for Coach Hicks?
Okay. Well, I guess no news is good news. It means they're tired of hearing me talk. I did a good job explaining. So I'll
I think
take
it was the latter. Yeah, I think it was the latter. So
I'll take the latter.
Yeah, really appreciate you coming tonight.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys. I'm glad to meet with your group today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so we finished the meeting kind of early today. So Coach Hicks, if you
I got a question.
You want to sign off?
I got a technical question if you've got some time left.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Robert.
Okay. Anybody put Docker on a Raspberry Pi before?
I have not. Actually, Raspberry Pi is my goal for this. I'm teaching myself this summer. That's
very good.
good.
Okay. Well, we're starting a group here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And with luck, we had our first meeting last week. And so keep an eye on the Piedmont Linux users group and see if we don't have some Raspberry activities in the near future.
Okay.
So, the website isn't up yet, but it will be.
Okay. Well, please keep me. Yeah, definitely keep me posted on that, Ben, as you all start getting that stuff up.
Okay. And part of the reason for asking the question is to put up that website. So I'm looking right now. We have Raspberry Pi running Apache and other independent servers.
Okay.
But I understand Docker is now available for Raspbian, so I'm trying to find out if anybody knows anything good, bad, or indifferent. Anything I should know before trying to put it on a Raspberry 2B.
Robert, this has been. I have experience with trying to put a container management system like Docker on Raspberry Pi cluster of 3 Raspberry Pis. I've used Raspbian OS as the base OS, and then another distribution called K3 OS.
Okay, I've seen both.
Yeah,
I'm using Raspbian now.
And of the two, Raspbian OS was the one that was more stable. I could not get K3 OS to work. Now K3S is just the small version of Kubernetes that can fit on a Linux-based OS like Raspbian, and that works on Raspbian. But I had trouble with K3 OS. So that's all I know about that.
Okay. Do you know if there's minimum Raspbian version requirement for Docker? I haven't found one yet, but I haven't tried it.
I'm guessing it's going to be at least a Raspberry Pi version 3.
Okay. Why? 2B and 3 differ by RAM size and Wi-Fi. Am I right, or is there another difference that matters?
RAM size and CPU capacity.
You can always just try it.
Yeah.
And that's what I would have done if this meeting hadn't been coming up.
Yeah. But yeah, I like to hear somebody gets K3 OS working.
Hey Ben, is K3 is that part of SUSE? Is that Rancher? Or am I thinking something else?
K3S you got two different things here. There's K3S, which is the project
Yeah.
that you can put on any Linux-based OS, and then there's K3OS, which is just an Ubuntu-based distribution tailored just for containers.